It was the fall of 1984. I was sitting in the back of a courtroom, observing, and I watched the story of a 2.5-year-old child unfold. He was a child who was blind, severely disabled, and had been removed within his earliest months of life for severe neglect. His parents were unable to care for him and barely able to care for themselves. But despite the challenges that this little toddler faced, he grew to love his foster family, and over 2.5 years he thrived. During that time, there was very little meaningful contact with his birth parents. So I'm in the back of the courtroom thinking, okay, somebody's going to talk about possibly termination of parental rights, maybe adoption, maybe permanent custody, but that didn't happen. Instead, the judge, without any prompting from anybody in the courtroom, ordered the immediate removal of that child, not to return home, but to be placed with a stranger, another foster family, because the judge believed that the relationship that that little boy enjoyed with his foster family was interfering with the rights of his parents. I waited for an objection, a request for an evidentiary hearing, a developmental assessment to determine if the child could even handle that kind of a transition. Maybe a parent-child interaction with the birth parents to determine that they really weren't able to care for him. But none of that happened, because this little boy did not have an attorney to fight for him. That day was an epiphany for me. I walked out of that courtroom determined to start an organization that was about justice for children, and that gave birth to the Rocky Mountain Children's Law Center. I'm sure each of you in this room has your own story, the story that inspired you, the story that keeps you going every day, the story that allows you to have the courage to fight for every one of the kids that might cross your path. And over time, these stories really become a part of our lives. We grow because of those stories. We change because of those stories. Hopefully, the children's lives are transformed because of our work. We might develop greater courage. We might develop a greater sense of urgency as a result. We may even develop a greater tolerance for the parents that we work with. But for most of us, we really do strengthen the commitment that we have to the work. So how would you characterize your journey? One major donor of the Children's Law Center called me a long-distance runner. I never thought of myself as a runner. I have never run, but I'm a long-distance runner in this work for sure. And perhaps one of the best things about having a 40-year career in this work is that you're around long enough to actually see change. So for us in this room, we've had an opportunity not only to see change, but to be a part of that change. And for many of us, we've been privileged enough to lead that change. And that's why we're all here. We're all here to celebrate major change. We're here to celebrate the leadership of the Children's Rights Litigation Committee and the important partnership that we have with the American Bar Association's section of litigation, without which we could not have been on this 20-year journey. And we're here to celebrate you and all the work you do across the country. To the younger lawyers in this room, you're building on a solid foundation of success. Perhaps your biggest challenge is to accelerate the pace of change. Children grow up. They can't wait forever. Today, we have much more research and information than we've ever had about brain development, about trauma, about adverse childhood experiences. We recognize the importance of a multidisciplinary approach to this work. We work across systems, education, child welfare, juvenile justice. We have more voices in the courtroom. We have lawyers and CASAs, and sometimes kids are in the courtroom, sometimes foster parents are interveners. We even have peer mentors. The legal principles have changed. The United States Supreme Court has spoken about the unique needs of children and youth. And youth themselves are taking to the streets. Kids have taken to the streets recently about guns and school violence. And in the child welfare arena, kids are speaking out as well. Foster youth across this country, through Foster Youth in Action and the many, many agencies around the country that are engaging foster youth, they are demanding that their voices be heard. They are demanding that sibling relationships be protected and that somebody pay attention to the trauma that the foster care system itself inflicts. However, to those same young lawyers, we have many of the same challenges. There are still children in this country without lawyers, abused and neglected children, kids who are charged with delinquent acts. In 2016, 1,700 kids died from child abuse. That was more than the previous year. On any given day, 428,000 kids are in foster care, and we know that they move repeatedly, and many of them end up homeless or in jail. High school graduation rates for kids in foster care are sometimes as low as 30%, and we know the college graduation rate is 1 or 2%. The school-to-prison pipeline is real, and we separate immigrant children from their parents at the border. So, what are we doing? Are we storming our state capitals? Are we have we taken to the streets this very issue? Have we marched on Washington? Is the plight of these clients any less a crisis than the many crises we face in this nation? It really is up to us. It's up to us because we are a powerful force for change. And all of you have come together to look at what we've done over the last 20 years and perhaps think about and strategize about, what we can do in our future. So let's get moving on that agenda. And before we start, I'm going to introduce Frank and Tony. So one of the best things about working in this field is you get to meet really passionate people around the country who care deeply about these kids and who are willing to go to the wall for them. Frank and Tony are two of those people, and I am privileged to call them my friends because we've known each other at least 2 decades or more. So Frank is the executive director of the Support Center for Child Advocates in Philadelphia. He's been that for 26 years, but spent 2 extra years there, kind of learning the ropes before they made him the leader of that group. Tony is the founder of the Children's Law Center in Lynn, Massachusetts, and some of us in this room journeyed to Boston last September to celebrate his 40th anniversary. When I asked Frank what I could say about him this morning, he said that he grows tomatoes and that he enjoys time with his 3 grandchildren. When I asked Tony, he said that he has lived the change over 40 years and that he was privileged to work with Jerome Miller, who was one of the very, very early, very, very courageous advocates for kids who wanted to treat kids differently and launched the deinstitutionalization movement.